Ishayas are for 200% of life, and that's pretty much why I became one. I was interested in a spiritual path. I was interested in becoming more present because I knew that's when life was good. But I didn't want to give up the good things of life. And I met the Ishayas and they said, no, it's not about putting yourself in a cookie cutter mold, but really respecting who you are and what you want to do and your gifts. And it's not about ending desire. It's about what kicks our butts is the attachment to desire. It's the attachment to an outcome. So yeah, the Ishayas are embracing 200% of life, this inner fulfillment and peace and contentment, but also the clarity, the wisdom, the energy to make the difference that we want to make in the moment and in the world. So often the spiritual path is, this is bad, stay away from that. The Ishayas were the first people who got the message through to me that it's not about the thing, it's about our reaction to the thing. So there's nothing wrong with sex, it's our relationship to sex that really kills us, for example.
Excited to have Arjuna Ishaya on today, who I think is the first monk that we've had on the show. So he's an Ishaya monk, he is a meditation teacher, and then he also describes himself as a family man and wannabe kayaker. One of the things he's going to be talking about is how to live a 200% life, which is something I was confused by at the start, but I think you're going to like the answer of what he means by 200%. Excited for today. Awesome, Arjuna. So I was explaining this concept of the cosmic bridge to you last week, which is something that's connecting your spiritual life, your material world. I'm sure in your profession you see a lot of people that get into meditation, but then they're not able to transfer those lessons into their daily lives. But I was wondering for you, what's been a cosmic bridge in your life?
Well, I think it is learning to listen to the present moment. I certainly came into a spiritual path with so many different ideas of how I should be. And really, when I listen truly to the present moment, when I truly get mindful, that will show me how I need to be, how I need to show up. And so I guess that's my cosmic bridge, is paying attention.
Well, so yeah, very, very simple but very powerful one of listening to the current moment, which I don't think a lot of people are able to do, right? So I guess trying to get a bit tactical here. How can people be more present? How can they listen more to the moment that they're in?
Well, I think it's a matter of prioritizing it. I think the reason not many people do is because we put so much emphasis on what's coming next rather than what's right here. And we're constantly time traveling like that. So first of all, prioritizing, really knowing that life is here, life is the stuff that's in front of us, and engaging with this means it can show you. I think it's always trying to speak to us, our wisdom, what the moment needs, but as I said, we're somewhere else. So by prioritizing now, we can actually have a chance to live now. So I don't think it's very difficult. It's just that we think some other moment is far more important than this one.
So I wanted to come onto you as well, because I imagine this will cover, becoming more present as well. So I see that you describe yourself as a Ishaya monk, which is actually not a term that I'd heard before, Ishaya. So I was wondering if you could tell us about that.
Well, we're kind of undercover. No, Ishayas are, I guess the easiest way to describe would be for 200% of life, and that's pretty much why I became one. I was interested in a spiritual path. I was interested in becoming more present because I knew that's when life was good. But I didn't want to give up the good things of life. And I met the Ishayas and they said, no, you don't. It's not about putting yourself in a cookie cutter mold, but really respecting who you are and what you want to do and your gifts. And like you said before we began recording, it's not about ending desire. It's about what kicks our butts is the attachment to desire. It's the attachment to an outcome. So yeah, the Ishayas are embracing 200% of life, this inner fulfillment and peace and contentment, but also the clarity, the wisdom, the energy to make the difference that we want to make in the moment and in the world. So yeah, it wasn't about, so often the spiritual path is, this is bad, stay away from that. The Ishayas were the first people who got the message through to me that it's not about the thing, it's about our reaction to the thing. So there's nothing wrong with sex, it's our relationship to sex that really kills us. So, for example.
So let's talk about your journey. So you said you went to meet Ishayas. Like, how did that come about? Like, what led to that process?
Well, I was working as an outdoor instructor in New Zealand, and I was living in one of the most beautiful places. I'd carefully set up my life. Had this house, incredible neighbor next door who was a fisherman, so he brought us fresh fish every week. I had 3 mountains, and I was to just sit there drinking coffee, admiring this view. I could run up any mountain, go snowboarding all winter, kayaking in the summer. I had life just carefully planned, carefully structured. But it was the most confusing time because none of it gave me satisfaction. None of it felt like success. You know, often we think that success looks a certain way. When you tick all these boxes, then you've made it. And yet I felt emptier than ever. And so it was really that having everything but feeling nothing led me to want, well, what is this all about? So that's kind of what led me started me seriously searching.
And so you said you went to see the Ishayas. Where were they, like, in the? Because I know you're based in the UK now, but you're from New Zealand. Was this like here, or did you go to like Asia or somewhere? How did that work?
Yeah, well, I thought I was planning a little pilgrimage to India to find myself, but I thought I better learn to meditate properly to become really truly mindful. And they were running a little course in New Zealand, and so I learnt there. And then they said, "Hey, if you're interested, there's a retreat center in British Columbia, Canada." And so I was at the end of a season. I thought, yeah, I might as well. I'll go spend some time there. So it pretty much just bounced from course to ending up in Canada to becoming a teacher. So, yeah.
So I wanted to come back to some of the things you said, which I thought were quite interesting, right? So you found this, you liked Ishaya because it's not about like giving up certain things, but more like, you know, almost incorporating, dealing with it. So what things maybe did you not want to give up, that when you found this spiritual path with like Ishaya, you were like, okay, well, they embrace this stuff and they're looking at it from a different way. I don't know if you can kind of explain the psychology behind that.
Well, I think my image of a monk or a truly spiritual person was like the Buddhist monks that I saw around the place. And they were peaceful and happy, but it seemed like they didn't own any possessions. They lived in community, which seemed pretty cool, seemed like a good bunch of people. But, you know, I was loving my kayaking. I was loving my snowboarding. I lived in a tourist town. I was young. I was meeting tons of people. And, you know, I really enjoyed physical, sexual, romantic relationships. I loved exploring and having good food. I didn't, you know, I loved the good things of life. And I kind of thought I had to give them up. That's what I saw in those monks that I knew in my hometown. And I didn't want to do that. So there was this kind of push-pull. I wanted peace and fulfillment and the wholeness of life, but I didn't want to give up my passions, really.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's very relevant to the topic of this podcast with the cosmic bridge, right? Because you've got the two aspects, right? Which is you can go too far in the materialistic direction, which is obvious, right? You want, I don't know, a fancy car, watch, whatever it is. But then the spiritual direction, obviously everyone's got their own path. But to you, being a monk, like meditating all day, you know, not eating much, you know, giving up sex, all these things, that wasn't really your path. And I guess the Ishaya way for you was that cosmic bridge, right? Because you're like, I can still live the life I want to live, but I can do it in a more meaningful way and be more present. Exactly.
And I know that's what they said. Basically, the world doesn't need a whole lot of people who are the same. They need individuals. They need people who are fully alive. And the nice watches and the cars and the good meals out, I mean, they're great fun in themselves, but they don't actually give you satisfaction in and of themselves. There's a, you know, in terms of my life, having everything sorted did not equal fulfillment. It didn't equal contentment. It didn't equal success. And so I knew it was something deeper than that. But you're so right. The spiritual people are often like, well, that's bad. I shouldn't want that. I shouldn't need that. I should be completely independent. And yet, these things are fun. These things of the earth and the planet and the experiences that we're born with and that we're attuned to make us who we are, really. And the denial of that is really denying one's true self, I would say. I just know you're a fan of Carl Jung, and just this morning, flicking through my social media and seeing a quote by him, but I'll mess it up, but it's in terms of the most scariest thing that you can do is accept yourself utterly and completely. And I know that's probably taken so far out of context, but I've seen a few snippets like that, and the experience of being okay in your own skin, exactly as you are. It's a difficult thing to do, but it's the most powerful thing you can do too. Because we're constantly looking at somebody else. How does he do it? How does she do it? We're looking for a role model, and yet, I guess, what's his name? Campbell. The myth, the hero myths, and he always talks about step into our own shoes and go, you know what? I have heroes and mentors, but what am I here to do? What do I love? What makes me alive? What makes me tick? And I think that's a crucial question, and one that can't come when you're busy chasing a future moment or something else.
Yeah, I like what you said, and I think going to Carl Jung and what you were talking around with being an Ishaya monk, right? You've got the concept of what Carl Jung calls the shadow, right? Which is all these things that are like buried in our own unconscious that maybe we haven't dealt with. And I think with what you're talking about with the Ishaya, it's like not feeling guilty of some of those emotions. And we've got things like anger, fear, right? You're never going to get rid of those emotions, but the way you can deal with them is recognize, oh, that's just anger, that's just fear. And once you recognize it, you move on from it. And those kind of emotions don't control you in a way, which is one of the things that Carl Jung talks about a lot.
Well, often those emotions, like I was terrified of my anger, and really, I would push it down, suppress it. You know this, and it would just explode inappropriately, either pointed at myself or someone who didn't deserve it. And really, in terms of acknowledging and being mindful of something like anger, it's like, it became a call to action. It's like something's not right. I want to speak here. I want to do. I need to say or do something. And so as opposed to being a bad thing, it was really the energy or impetus to do something. So I found that quite useful way of looking at something like anger, for example.
Yeah, 100%. And I think over, my spiritual practices, which I don't think I've gone as far below the iceberg as you've gone with spiritual practices, but that's definitely been my learning, is that shadow, and really that you're never going to overcome evil or get rid of all the evil in the world, but what you can do is shine a light on your own evil, your own darkness, your own things in your unconscious, and really get to know yourself. And I think it's an important message for the current generation, and not just generation, people of all ages, but often we're always looking to project something onto someone else rather than thinking around, okay, how can I take a bit more responsibility here for this situation that I'm in?
I think that was one of the biggest lessons I've learned through a spiritual path, is it's all about me. And even in terms of how did I create this and how do I want to create this next? And it was a scary thing, because it's very easy for me to go, well, it was her fault, it's his fault, it's the world's fault. But if it's their fault, then I'm a victim to that. I can't do anything with it. And maybe it wasn't my fault, but given it's happening, what do I want to do? And that's a big step. It's a huge step to claim responsibility.
Yeah, and it's quite a difficult thing. I think I struggled with that at the start when I first kind of started having some of these realizations, is like, oh yeah, I've got more responsibility over my actions and my emotions and things that I didn't realize, and it's quite a tough thing to go through as a person.
Yeah, well, it keeps you humble, We think we've got it all sorted, and then life shows you, hey, you can do things. the Buddhists sometimes say do things skillfully, more skillfully or less skillfully. And I like that distinction. It's not right or wrong. It's just you could do it better. You could learn. You could put this into more grace, more energy, more wisdom, more clarity, more courage. Let's go.
Yeah, I like that. I wanted to come back to something you said earlier, which I wasn't sure exactly what you meant, so I wanted to ask about it with the 200% life. What do you mean by the 200% life?
Oh, I think it's those two spheres of the external world, the world of ambition and responsibility, and just making your physical way in the world, creating the kind of life that you want, surrounding yourself with the people, the careers, the possessions, the experiences that you want, but also the internal world. So there's 100% there. There can be 100% fulfillment. And a lot of people have everything that they could ever want or need. And yet there's another 100%, the internal, the contentment, the pure presence, the sense of alignment with now and our higher self in this moment. And a lot of people have, like I was saying, the external pretty close to 100% or pretty good, but very little internal anchor or alignment. And as I was saying, perhaps there's a whole spiritual brigade of who are getting pretty good at being content and present, but have no ability to influence or the material world. And so that's what 200% is the combination of the both. The Ishayas always say it has to start with the internal world. Our beliefs, especially what comes from just around that, the beliefs and the judgments and the habits, the shadow side, it's always inside out. The way the world works thinks that when I have this thing, then I'll be happy and content. I'll be happy when. And so that leads to a constant chase for more and more and more. And hence, why have I got so much stuff, but I'm still dissatisfied? I don't know what I'm doing here. That's what I meant by, does that make more sense?
Yeah, no. I like that frame of 200%, and I'm looking at it now in a bit of like a almost Taoist way of you've got the balance of your internal world and your external world, and often they're totally interrelated, right? Of how you're feeling, you're going to project onto what's outside as well. Yeah.
I love that quote by that French writer, Anaïs Nin. We don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And we're very much looking through a belief or expectation coloured glass. The glass is coloured by our past or our hopes or fears for the future.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to come to like present day Arjuna. So I know you're like a meditation teacher as well. So I wanted to talk around like some of the meditation teaching and monk practices that you're doing at the moment. What's projects are exciting you?
Well, ever since lockdown finished, it's been so evident how rewarding it is to have face-to-face communication. I mean, I think I stayed afloat doing podcasts and online things, but meeting people directly, heart to heart, face to face, it excites me no end. So I've been arranging retreats and courses and bits and bobs for as many different people as I can. People who are interested in the Ishaya teachings specifically, or I'm doing courses with the military as well in terms of a broader mindfulness, meditation, stress management, 200% of life type courses. So yeah, that's really exciting me at the moment.
Yeah, the military thing sounds extremely interesting. So yeah, would love to hear more about that. So is that people that have kind of some traumas going on from their time in the military, or what was the kind of purpose of doing that?
Well, it was really for anyone. I mean, often we think military, we think combat, trauma through war zones, things like that, and that certainly plays a part. But also just trauma through brutal upbringings and abuse and the stuff of humanity. But also not just trauma, but that's kind of slow drip of working in an institution where you may or may not have much influence or control or feeling of control over the direction of the organization, where you've been asked to do these minor tasks and you're champing at the bit to do what you've been trained to do. Like all government and some corporate organizations, there's so much in the way of expectation, but so little in terms of resources to fulfill that expectation. I think the guys, some of the senior guys in the army, are saying how the army has always sucked to a degree, but they always took much more than they gave back. But there were certain things that made the nest a lot more comfortable. And as austerity's gone on, all those sort of little perks which made the tough things dealable with just being stripped away. It's getting harder and harder to balance the equation. So, just that in terms of any human being, that drip of stress, of feeling like I'm not really in control, I'm not fulfilled, I'm stretched from pillar to post in my work and my family, my health or whatever. Just the stuff of humanity. So not just trauma is what I'm trying to say. the stuff of life.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, because we often look at military, as you said, and we're like, oh, they've got these traumas from being on the battlefield, but then there's all the things that happened to them before that as well. I love hearing stories on this podcast, going back to Carl Jung. He talks about the archetypes and these eternal stories that we all have. But with the case of, say, your work and the military, right, is there any story of like someone that you worked with that had this like really incredible transformation?
I love it when someone's face just lights up and go, oh man, I get it. I see how I've been getting in my own way. I see how I've been making life far more tricky than I need to. Do you know that kind of almost that switch from being a victim where life is done to me to realizing, oh man, I don't know why and I don't like it and I don't want to repeat it, but maybe I can see that this is done for me, to wake me up in some way, to show me a better way of living, a more skillful way of living. And I think they can happen in a flash, and I've seen people's faces just that when the penny drops and go, oh man, I'm not broken. I'm just carrying so much weight, and all I need to do is take the time and space to take this weight off. But also that slow dawning, like a sunrise, that sometimes this life just shows us in many different ways, and it takes a period of time where we go, oh, I get it. Life is happening for me. And at least that's what I choose to assume. And so I couldn't really pick one story in particular, but just so many different faces of everything, from being wrongly accused and up for a court martial to having, just having your name ruined through something completely innocent, to your ex-partner stripping you of your kids and denying you access and just making life so hard, to life-changing, altering diagnoses like losing a leg or cancer or losing an eye. And it's like just that change of, oh, why is life happening to me, to, man, I gotta work with this. As horrible as it is, I want to embrace what is good and right and beautiful, and not lament what is wrong and broken and missing. So, you asked one story. I just think of so many different faces in a flash of that either direct realization or that dawning, kind of like, oh man, maybe this is my responsibility to choose a different attitude.
Yeah. No, obviously you gave different circumstances there, which I actually think was even more interesting, around, someone that's lost a leg, someone who can't see their kids, and reframing that and not thinking, why has this happened to me, but this is happening for me. This is part of like my story in a way. And it kind of brought me on to this. I was looking at some of your social media posts before this, and I've got a couple of quotes here, and I think this one is very relevant to what you just said. So you put, drop your insistences and your shoulds, embrace your reality as if you have chosen it yourself, be present in and grateful for what you do have. So I really love this post and wanted to ask, like, what inspired you to write this post?
I just had a flood of conversations with people who are having a tough time at the moment, who are really struggling with either some heavy emotions or some external event or people that are hard to accept. and I've seen time and time again, it's never the thing, or even it's never the feeling, but it's our reaction to it. And if you can stop resisting it and fully accept it, saying, oh, this is the facts. This is the facts of now. Then it makes the whole thing so much easier to bear. What makes a tough situation is our resistance to the situation or the feeling or the event. And we can change that. And that's where our power lies. And that's why I said just fully, don't give yourself a should, don't get stuck in the stories of this should be this way, but step back and go, well, this is the facts. What can I do with it? It just makes everything so much easier. I think Jordan Peterson was, again, referencing Jung, was talking about Christ and the metaphor there. When you choose to freely pick up your own cross, it stops being a burden. And the same deal with us. When we really go, well, this is it. Come on, bring it on. It somehow lightens the load. It's the Stockdale paradox, right? Have you heard of that guy, James Stockdale?
No, not heard of him.
Oh, he's cool checking him out. He was a US Navy pilot, got shot down over Vietnam and locked in most horrendous circumstances in Vietnam. Because he was an officer, he was tortured, and the Vietnamese were hoping he would make a confession. And Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, who a few of your listeners will know, he interviewed him and said, well, tell me about the people who didn't survive. And he said, well, that was the optimists. And he went, what? The optimists, the ones that were going, well, we'll be out by Christmas, we'll be out by Easter. They were constantly putting their hope in a future moment. And he said, what I did is, the paradox is, you must embrace the brutal realities of your current situation. You must see everything so clearly, but never give up hope that things will change. You can't have one or the other. If you just head in the brutal reality without hope, without faith, then you die of misery. If your head is in the future and the hope and the trust without acknowledging the circumstances, you've got nothing to work with. And so a classic example of pure acceptance while keeping your chin up, going, I'm going to get out of here one day. And that's what James Stockdale said, I will get out. I don't know when, and everything that I go through will be my making as a man. It will form my character. It will allow me to do the things that will come next. I just get shivers up my spine just saying that. But that's what I meant by acceptance versus resistance. And maybe it's easier, like Viktor Frankl in the Nazi concentration camps, same kind of deal. But maybe it's easier in a living hell like a Vietnamese war camp than it is with the drip of daily life, But it doesn't change the rule, so to speak, is that resistance makes the thing harder to bear.
Yeah. I like the way you said you need both, right? So you said like the brutal, you have to accept your brutal reality, so you can't live in denial. You need to accept the way things are, but then you also can't think everything's always going to be this way, my life is terrible, right? You need to also have that hope, like things do change and things always do change, right? One of the only constants we have in our life is change.
Yeah, I guess it comes back to, like we're saying, the Tao Te Ching again, the mix of this and that, the mix of pure present moment and having a top of the mountain to climb.
Yeah, I've got another quote which is quite similar to what you were just talking about with the acceptance resistance here, but I just wanted to read out part of this and see what inspired this one. So I'd say the greatest lesson life has to teach is that resistance to anything only makes it worse. Everything is bearable when you fully and completely accept it exactly as it is. Before this, there is denial and hardship. After, there is freedom. So this is another one I really liked. So this was also a recent one. So was it kind of similar circumstances that inspired this one? Yeah,
I think I go on little themes. So that was yesterday's post. So the last 2 or 3 days have been similar kind of themes. So yeah. But same message. Is really truly embrace what you have right now, what you can do right now. And resistance is futile.
Awesome.
Simple to say, harder to do, right?
Yeah, 100%. Well, this question I'm going to ask is going to tie into that, Arjuna. So put yourself back, I don't know, 10, 15 years, even 20 years, kind of before you'd gone down this spiritual journey, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Keep going. Keep trusting. I would say trust my own wisdom and clarity. There's been times where I've had words on the tip of my tongue or a decision to make, and I just haven't made them. I was too concerned about what other people would think. But to really trust that. Even if everybody's going left and you're go right, just go right. Give it a shot. You can always come back.
Just last thing as well. So the whole Ishaya concept. Are there any like resources, videos, etc. you recommend for like people to check out on that?
Probably, probably a book. There it is. There's the cover. It's called 200%. An instruction manual for living fully. I happen to write it, but I think it might explain to people. I tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. So often people dismiss the spiritual path because it comes with a big dose of woo-woo, and I wanted to bridge, to make a cosmic bridge between people who truly want more from life without the fluff getting in the way. But I'm on social media too, so that's perhaps a more easier entry for people if they just wanted to jump into something.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we'll put Arjuna's socials and a link to his book in the description. But yeah, thanks a lot for coming on today. I've really enjoyed the discussion.
Oh, thank you, Mike. It's been a blast. And if there's anything I can do for you or your listeners, please just let me know.
Love today's episode, the concept of the 200% life. You got the 100% internal, 100% external. How can we balance these two things together? The cosmic bridge is one of those things that can do that. And it was interesting to hear how Ishaya was something that related to Arjuna because he didn't have to give up certain things. He just had to reassess his life and what he was doing and become more present. And I also really liked what he said around embracing difficulties that you're having in the present, but then also not losing hope for the future. So it's always that balance, that cosmic bridge between the two. And don't forget to subscribe to us on all your favorite podcast channels and also YouTube. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode.